For those who've been praying for this day and for this time together over the months as we begin this discussion and conversation between College Place and St. Timothy's, I give you thanks for your prayers and your warming spirits as we've worked to make this happen and to bring this about. It's a wonderful thing that we're able to. I did a rough estimate up in the pulpit while the choir was singing. I think we have space for about 300 more people. So we got plenty of room. So welcome to St. Timothy's, to College Place, to be here and to worship together. My spirit is already livened and lifted. I hope yours is as well. Well, how was your Thursday? Did it go okay? Anything particular happen that you noticed? Traffic was unusually light through campus with the students all leaving. It's kind of quiet around here. Yep, Thursday was just another day. Unless you were being a little bit mindful of the Christian calendar. For it was the Ascension, the day that we observe the Ascension in the church calendar. The 40th day after Easter doesn't fall on a weekend. Oh no. I was going to get you all together Thursday, but I thought you wouldn't show up. I did one of those not long ago. It wasn't nearly this crowded. It's the day that we hear about in our text this day. That where Jesus takes the disciples out just a little bit and is lifted up into the heavens. Now, the disciples oftentimes get a bad rap. They don't get what Jesus is saying. They don't understand what he's teaching. They don't understand what he means. They don't listen like he wants them to. And they just generally don't get it. And this is just one more instance. I don't really fault the disciples. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's gone on recently that I wouldn't be able to understand either. The death of Jesus on the cross, him being put in a tomb, him being raised from the dead, from seeing him in the room, for having meals with him, experiences and exposure to Jesus, the resurrected Christ. And now he's like, oh, let's go on a field trip out of town. And then suddenly he begins to lift up into the clouds. Peter Gomes always said that Jesus went and he will return as he came, as he went. Therefore, it means feet first, that Jesus is coming back. Peter Gomes also said that he really wanted to have a band from the tower, from the top of power, there on Ascension Thursday, where the band would suddenly start playing these loud, joyous songs because Jesus had risen to his final place of rule, to the heavens. And the poor disciples were left behind, waiting. Throughout the Gospel of Luke text, Easter takes place pretty quickly. Everything happens on the same day. Whoosh, done. And we in the church drag it out for 50. Just so you'll know, it's been a long time. The church is always dragging stuff out much longer than it needs to take to get it done. And yet, our human brains and our human minds have to have a little bit of time to process such things. The resurrection of Christ that takes place in the world would be more than most humans were used to. I have to give them that credit. I can't fault them for that. But I'm joyous for their witness and their telling of that story again, so that my heart and my eyes and my ears can hear of the resurrection and its power. And yet, next week, we'll celebrate the Spirit's presence with Pentecost. We're not quite there yet. I admit, this time in between when the Ascension is and when Pentecost comes, I kind of wonder, what am I supposed to do? Are we supposed to keep the Paschal candle lit? We say that it's the Paschal candle, it's the Christ candle, and we light it at times of baptism, in times of death, and we light it for the season of Easter. Okay, there's my answer. But it reminds us of the presence of Christ in our world, the resurrected Christ, the light that burns. So should we snuff it out on Thursday? I mean, Jesus is gone. But the Spirit's not quite here yet, at least on the church calendar. What do we do? Well, part of the beauty of coming along 2,000 years later is that we know that the Spirit was given. The Spirit wasn't rescinded. It's when I always kind of go a little twisted when we say we put away the Alleluias for Lent. Well, every Sunday is a little bit of Easter. Every Sunday we celebrate the resurrection. That's why we gather. That's the good news that comes to us in the world. And so therefore it is time to sing Alleluias even during Lent. But we don't have to. It's okay, whatever we want to do. But it's a time of waiting. Christ has ascended, gone into heaven, and the disciples are left there waiting for the Spirit to be given. Their promise that Jesus, that the Spirit will be given to them in Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem that they will go out into all the ends of the earth. Got it? We're waiting. These disciples stood looking up in the sky, waiting and wondering what to do. Just celebrated my 10th year from graduating with D-Min from Wesley. I was the last one in my class to get it done. It wasn't because I was just that slow. It was because I just didn't do it. My preachers, this is the only cohort of this they've ever offered. It was preaching in the 21st century. Which the funniest thing about that is the last form I had to fill out for them was a printout of an 8.5 by piece of 11 that I had to go up onto the IBM Selectric that still is in the history room here and let it warm up for 20 minutes before it would come on and type the last form for preaching in the 21st century. It says so much. But in this thing, there were 16 of us preachers, and these people they're fancy preachers. They big time kind of people. I was the peon in the room. I was mostly the youngest one too, but I was still a peon in the room. Those people, they got vicious. You know, they didn't come up with nicknames for each other, and I just soon not think about some of them. But I do like mine because I remember the sermon. We would have 16 people. We would go for 2 weeks. I've heard more sermons in 1 2 week period than most of people here in a year. There were 16 of us. We each would preach. We preached 2 weeks at a time. And so that's 32. And then I went to 2 churches in the middle on the Sunday. So that's 34. And then 2 on each bookend. That was 36, 38 sermons in a 2 week period. That's more than most people hear in a year these days. But one of the sermons that we preached, that was preached that week, was from the guy, and he said that he faulted the disciples because Jesus went into heaven and told them to go back to Jerusalem, and they just sit there and looked up in the sky, waiting, not doing anything. He said, do they not know what they need to be doing? Why do they just sit there, paused, looking and waiting? And he said, you know, sometimes the church doesn't do nearly enough. Well, I got my nickname that day. I said, wait. The United Methodist Church does a lot of good in the world. I mean, it does some damage and some hurt, but it's working toward better, I hope. If not, I might as well hang up my hat. But I thought about some of the stuff that the church does together, campus ministries and new church starts and hospitals and orphanages, children and youth programs that happen all across the world. Even when I'm asleep, the United Methodist Church is at work on my behalf. Oh, that's why I love it. That's why I love it. There's a lot of good still happening in the world, even sometimes despite what seems like the disciples staring up into space. and not moving anything. Sometimes what we have to learn and what we need to learn during the season, and I think what it teaches us, is the waiting game. Everything we do, we want it instantaneously. I go to the garden shop at one of the big box stores, and there are 12 people in line, and I don't understand why. Do they not know it's spring? I have stuff to do, not wait in line. You know, we'd rather have microwave popcorn than a slow-cooked roast because it's quick. It's the easy answer, and we know what to do next. But part of life is this time of waiting to see how this will be, what a result will be, what the end will be, what God is telling us and calling us how to live our life together. The disciples were waiting, but we know from experience and from history that they eventually got the Spirit, that they went out into the world, and those 12 people changed the world. Well, Judas was replaced. It takes some time. Sometimes personnel has to work on a couple things. But the world was changed in a way that, for the most part, keeps moving toward perfection. One of the best lines I've ever heard was, on the best day, the church exemplifies just a small, tiny bit of heaven, the best that God offers to the world, just on its best days. Waiting sometimes causes us to ponder and to reflect and to hope, to remember the times where God has called us and the places that God has brought us out of, and where God leads us to go next. I mean, today is a big day in the life of our congregations at this point. We're coming together to do something different, something new, something unique. Our communion wares are from different places. Helen said we brought the whole kitchen sink out here. But the chalices are from College Place and from St. Timothy's, and the pitchers from St. Timothy's. Some of this has been here for a long time. Some of it just got here this week, and it's okay. I picked out the flowers for today. The hydrangeas are from here at College Place, and the wildflowers and the daisies are from St. Timothy's, and there's a couple of pieces of the yarrow that the plant wasn't that big, so I only got a couple of yours. And then we had some here at the College Place that's the yarrow. And so some of ours is a little bit more faded because it gets a little more sun than yours does. But it's been around a little longer, but it all came together in this wonderful pot that we had a little bit to do with, but God brought forth the full glory of it. And even the wildflowers, I don't think any of y'all planted them. I just think they were there. Kind of a reminder that God sometimes does things despite our efforts that bring about beauty and make the world a little better place. You know, part of what we take in our vows now, since I think it's 1996, when we take it, do you vow to pledge your support by your prayers, your presence, your gifts, your service, and your witness? You know, it only took the church a few hundred years to figure out we needed to add in witness to what it was membership. Methodism is really good at some things, and some people say it's the best kept secret because we won't tell anybody about it. And you know, now when I see the sidewalk preachers downtown or on the corner, I'm like, oh, not again. You make my job so much harder. It's not what I want. It's not the way I think God comes into the world. It's not my experience of salvation and faith and what that means. I mean, now I'm thinking there's probably some folks who've had a valid, life-changing experience because of a sidewalk preacher, and that's good, and I give God thanks for that. But I also think there's a lot of us that are scared by that and think that that's all religion is. And that doesn't gladden my heart. But what I think we vow to do is to witness to the world a reminding of God's presence in our lives and in their lives. To take part of the beauty that they have received and they do and learn from it. And from what we know and what we understand, to offer that to other people around us. Yeah, this God thing is a lot of sharing. It's not just me and Jesus. It's God and us. A God who loves even me. And a God who loves you. Oh, yeah. There might be times of waiting, uncertainty, not knowing. But we know that we are God's people. And that God lives and dwells within us and within our world around us. And we're to hear God's call upon our lives and where God is calling us next. Trusting that God is already there. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who was, who is, and who is to come. Amen.